About 4 decades ago, the high hills in the north of Thailand were something of a mystery to Thais who lived in the plains. These hills were only accessible by air and by foot. But that did not deter His Majesty the King from visiting the areas. In so doing, it became clear to him the root cause of the complicated problems prevailing there, namely politics, natural resources, lifestyle of the hill tribes, and drugs, was interrelated.
It has been almost 4 decades since His Majesty first travelled to the hilly north to gather first-hand information as to the way the Highlanders lived.
His Majesty made multiple visits there out of concern over their livelihood. By helicopter, he went from hill to hill. What was evidence was the Highlanders earned their living through slash and burn farming.
On his trips, His Majesty not only found the land to be covered with opium plantations, but also came face to face with what the government sector had never been aware of. The lush and green hills had become completely barren, with exposed hilltops due to slash and burn farming. Trees had been felled to facilitate only a couple of years of opium cultivation. With complete soil degradation, the people moved on to their next plots of opium farming. If the conditions continued on unchecked, the country's water sources would be depleted in no time.
Nothing much had been done by the government sector, because they lost touch with reality, having never seen things from a helicopter.
The hope of convincing the hill tribes to discontinue their opium plantation seemed far-fetched at the time. One reason was because the country was facing internal security threats imposed by communist insurgent forces. Another reason was because none of the Highlanders were naturalized Thais. The use of force would have given them an excuse to side with the invaders and take up arms against the Thai government. The Golden Triangle was so widely known at the time that people were led to believe that opium growers earned phenomenal income from their product. In the midst of all this, how then could they be convinced that they should give it up? Getting to know the Highlanders personally, understanding them and their culture, and attaining their acceptance were methods that His Majesty practiced. Having to travel long distances to reach the hill tribe villages, His Majesty came to realize the opposite of what most people believed. Despite the farming and trading of opium, their lives were merely of subsistence level, bordering on poverty. Besides, they were physically weak due to malnutrition.
Of course, His Majesty could not just sit back after that. He took whatever action possible, and what was possible for him to do was to stop the opium farming.
The truth was that opium grossed huge income for drug traders, but not opium growers who earned only a fraction.
His Majesty asked them how much they earned from opium growing. They might not answer other, for fear of being arrested, but with His Majesty, they were straightforward. It finally dawned on him that if temperate climate crops were provided for them, their income would increase, and they would steer clear of opium in the end.
His Majesty was informed that the hill tribes got the same price for their opium as for their peaches. The information inspired him to research on opium substitution crops for the people. If you keep to the point, solving a problem will not be too difficult. And when you say something, say it simply, in a matter-of-fact way. If something needs correction, correct it at the fact.
There have been instances where he could not get any answer from government officials. But it was different with His Majesty. He got all the answers. It's like, to them he was an old acquaintance, a father.
His Majesty's genuine understanding of the root cause of their problems, coupled with his ability to get acquainted with them personally, inspired him to embark on the development work, an initiative which became the starting point of the Royal Project. In 1969, an amount from His Majesty's personal funds was utilised for the initiation of the Royal Project. Primary objectives were to stop the slash-and-burn farming, start serious reforestation, and provide the hill tribes with appropriate opium substitution crops. His Majesty's target was to definitely separate forest from farming. No encroachment was to be made by the forest upon the farmland, and vice versa. But the key condition pertaining to the promotion of a crop substitution program was that the substitution crops must generate better income for the people. Thus, research and study on temperate climate crops and high-altitude agriculture were given top priority to be carried out on an urgent basis. With cooperation and collaboration from academics and specialists who gladly volunteered their services, an influx of research works on temperate climate fruits, flowers and vegetables began to flow into the Royal Project. Then came the day when the Highlanders were introduced to strawberries for the first time.
We asked for volunteers who would grow this new crop and get 3. You see, none had ever seen strawberries before, only, they said, the king wanted them to experiment growing it, so they were willing to try.
The Royal Project provided the people with advice and consultation on the new crop and the best methods, for example, stepped terrace, plantation, dripping system and organic farming, in line with the local conditions. Soon an expanse of bright red dots were seen atop Intanon Mountain. They were the tiny fruits that used to grow only in countries with cool climates.
Marketing of harvested strawberries was in our care while earnings reversed back to the 3 growers. As it happened, their pockets bulged due to the high price of strawberries. Others were by and by stimulated, seeing those bulging pockets. And that's how the cultivation spread.
By implication, high returns realised from the 3 volunteers' experiment plots rendered a public relations service to the Royal Project. Eventually, longer and longer lines of volunteers crisscrossed the Highlands.
At that point, we had to take care of both product marketing and transportation. The growers received their earnings in proportion to the sales volume.
From the initial stage of crop substitution, promotion, advanced researches have now been conducted on hundreds of new crop species.
Cool climate crops have been initiated by the Royal Project, including peach, plum, persimmon and Arabica coffee. The latter is extensively distributed in hill tribes. We crossed the native species with selected foreign varieties. That's how we progressed.
Doi Kum, a small hill in the north, is now known as the brand name of the Royal Project products, widely marketed domestically as well as abroad. The name Doi Kum has been selected to signify the presently happy lifestyle of people living atop this small hill. The lifestyle that strongly contrasts with the poverty-stricken way of life on the prosperous Golden Triangle of 4 decades ago. The solid agro-industry, which started off on 3 experimental plots of strawberries, has come full cycle through a series of well-planned and systematic development work. The Royal Project is the world's first and only private organisation that succeeded in ceasing opium cultivation. The lush green hills in the north testify to the success His Majesty once outlined. If we can successfully implement this project, convince the hill tribes to settle down in one place and join in the conservation of forest and soil, as well as provide them with a reasonable standard of living, the enormous benefits occurring there will then be on a sustained basis. From the northern highlands, where man-made problems prevailed, let's turn now to the natural problems in coastal areas of Narathiwat province in the south, where more than 300,000 rai of swamplands used to perennially stand under stagnant water.
In those days, zero farm yields gave rise to famine. Some had to move and settle somewhere else, while others had to seek other locations for their rice farming.
His Majesty steadily travelled to visit his subjects in Narathiwat province, starting in 1973 onwards. That was how he learned about acidic soil in swamplands, which was detrimental to farming and caused hardships which had been prevailing in the areas. With his subjects feeling resigned to the fact of life in the face of such useless soil, the Lord of the land scrutinized the problem from a completely different angle.
He came to inspect the land, which used to be extremely acidic. Not even grass would grow in some spots. The king wanted to find a way to correct soil acidity to help farmers.
Just as the dentist was busy drilling a hole to drain the pus from inside my tooth, it suddenly dawned on me as to how to remedy the soil acidity. The flood water must be drained out to the sea, in the way the pus was being drained. Then the sodden land would dry up. Following the royal-initiated methodologies, drainage ditches and water gates were constructed. Drain water out to the sea and impede the intrusion upstream of salt water over cultivated land.
His Majesty had hoped that soil rehabilitation through drainage of acidic water would be successful, but that was not the case. The thick layer of strongly acidic soil could not be washed away, no matter how many times you tried. The more you did, the more kept emerging from underneath. Finally, His Majesty changed to the flushing technique. That's how I describe it, not His Majesty.
The problem could not be solved because after the swamps had been drained, the soil grew more acidic due to the fact that pyrites in the mud layer release sulfuric acid as they oxidize. This understanding led to His Majesty's initiation of tricking the soil theory.
It was thus called because, in de-acidifying the soil, His Majesty's method was to accelerate oxidation and maximize acidity. Regardless of the degree of soil acidity, then apply countermeasures to combat it. In his view, if the most complicated problem could be tackled, all else would be no cause for concern.
The royal-initiated procedure can be summarized as follows. Allow the area to be inundated for different periods of time for de-acidification effect. Then allow the flood to drain off. The procedure should be repeated many times a year so as to alternate between drying and flooding of the soil. When the sulfur-bearing soil dries, oxidation renders it acidic as pyrites release sulfuric acid in the process. And when the soil is wet, acid and the water will be drained off together. The procedure resembles the cycle in nature whereby dry season alternates with rainy season only. His Majesty tricked the soil by inducing repeated dryness and flooding over and over within a year. This served to accelerate chemical reaction in the soil so that the soil acidity was maximized. Study was conducted on the natural process of acidification of the soil. Findings showed that at the point where the soil became extremely acidic, such that crops could not be grown productively, solutions lay in the control of groundwater level, so that groundwater was kept above the layer of mud containing pyrites to prevent oxidizing and releasing of sulfuric acid. At the time of flushing out the area with water, lime must be added to and mixed with topsoil, while groundwater level must be controlled for deacidification effect until cropping was possible. These matters must be studied. Imagination is also required. No textbook contains them. If there were such textbooks, we could perhaps cross over to Malaysia to observe rice farming there. But we have our own method for marshland rice cropping, which ensures enough rice to eat and even to sell.
Having succeeded to the extent that the method could be publicised, His Majesty was convinced that as there was no textbook anywhere else in the world on the subject of his research, it means that no other countries had thought of this. So, what we implemented proved successful and could be disseminated as a model to be followed.
As local needs for new types of crops, fisheries or livestock varied according to the community and region, His Majesty enlisted the services and expertise of 29 government offices in the study and experimentation of new crop species or animal breeds, as well as farming methods that will best suit deacidified soil. Results of the study and test are then disseminated to the people. Thus, swamplands which used to be abandoned are of high economic value now for the people of Narathiwat province.
It was like creating a model of success to benefit farmers. So many officials from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives made a pool effort to help in the areas of agriculture, agricultural extension, fishery, livestock and irrigation. It was a brainstorming effort to jointly correct the acidic soil problem.
Profound understanding for and familiarity with the root problems, effective methods which met the people's needs and potentials have led to effective development as targeted. However, there is one common factor which contributes to the success of the two projects that differ in nature but resemble each other in terms of their mode of operation. That factor lies in the united effort on the part of participating agencies, be they governmental, educational or private, which is always emphasized by His Majesty as the very essence of development. Work for the progress of the country or happiness of the populace cannot be done by a person alone. Everyone must join hands. A specialist is to make the best of his or her specialized knowledge for solidarity's sake. If many have common specialized knowledge, they should collaborate. Even with the same specialization, their points of view may differ, in which case they should talk it over rather than be involved in disputes.
Freshwater fish population in natural water sources in Thailand has been on the decline since 1920. One contributing factor to this lies in the gradual expansion of irrigation works, which is detrimental to the laying of fish eggs. A factor for the rapid decline lies in the advancement of fishery technologies. These factors might have been ignored by many, but not His Majesty the King. One of the royal initiatives involved the production of low-cost source of protein to nurture his poverty-stricken subjects. Fishery and livestock promotion were two areas of development support present in almost every royal-initiated development project.
1965 saw the visit of then Japanese Crown Prince Akihito to present to His Majesty the King the Japanese fish breed Tilapia nilotica. Experimental raising and breeding of the fish was carried out within Chitleda Villa grounds, prior to distribution for further breeding throughout the country. As the colour of the fish is black, His Majesty gave it the Thai name Pla Nin.
Within the past 10 years, I heard many scientists say in the global context that the remedy for poverty had been found in Pla Nin because it grows fast. Our king, however, found out about it 4 decades ago. I just started my career as a civil servant then.
Every time His Majesty learned that certain fish breeds were nearing extinction, he would instruct the Fisheries Department to target its effort on further breeding of the fishes to deter their extinction. An instance of success involved the further breeding of Bla Burk, the world's largest catfish, and Bla Kraho, the world's largest carp. Fishery experimentation was also conducted on the breeding of trout, which has never inhabited a Thai water source before, generates high income, and is compatible with Thailand's climate.
I was enlisted by His Majesty to see about trout raising in the cool environment of the north. This would fit, as trout is expensive in our country, and success in this could mean better living for the hill tribes. I found a feasible spot for it, but it did not work out. So I went back to inform His Majesty that almost all of them had died because of the local people had poisoned them. He laughed, but did not reprimand me. I went back for repeated attempts until finally trout breeding is possible in Thailand. Marketing of such foreign fish is now under His Serene Highness Prince Pisaded's auspices.
From the initial phase, when the royal experiment with fish breeding started on Chitleda Villa grounds, fishery and livestock development has found its place in various royal-initiated development projects for more than 5 decades now.
His Majesty is often heard saying, if you see the water, there must be fish in it. Fish does not drink, but lives in the water. That's why you see him constantly releasing fish breeds into a lake. Most people think it is part of his merit-making activity. It's not so. His idea is to have plentiful fishes in the water.
The essence of His Majesty's dictum, understanding, acquaintance and development, is evident in royal-initiated fishery and livestock development, whereby one needs first to understand the topographical environment suitable to various types of animals. Then one needs to get acquainted with the people's attitude and lifestyle. These 2 steps are decisive in drafting the development plan. If we promote something that requires the use of technology, the farmer will have to incur debts. But when he makes a profit, he goes to celebrate. In the end, debts are steadily accrued. Then the government is impelled to waive them at the expense totaling billions of bahts. This may sound like I wanted to bar the people from using high technology. Actually, I do target on the application of considerably advanced technology, but on a step-by-step basis.
His Majesty's point in project promotion was to divide farmers into 2 groups based on the level of their potential. The raising of certain animals, which required advanced technology, is not suitable for the ordinary group of farmers. So, considering the appropriate type of animals to be promoted must take account of local conditions.
Aside from further breeding, His Majesty initiated crossbreeding for various types of animals, especially those of foreign breeding, in keeping with the regional characteristics.
Right now, we're experimenting on the Pupan breed of black chicken, with its distinctively black body, feathers, meat, internal organs, and even blood. As you know, the price of genuinely black chicken is relatively high.
Development of plant species and animal breeds help upgrade farmers' quality of life. Still, Thailand's generations-long agro-social structure makes it almost impossible for them to have any bargaining power in the marketing scheme. His Majesty's initiation that proved to ensure security against threats, which is instrumental to sustained success and survival on the part of the farmers, was the establishment of cooperative system, the first of which was the royal-initiated Hup Kapong cooperatives.
People up front are expected to extend their hands to those following behind. By pulling them to the front, everybody can walk together, prosper together.
The core of cooperative system lies in brainstorming and systematic joint operation and planning, which results in increased bargaining power, especially as regards pricing and marketing.
Members of the co-op must register their types and extent of produce or products. The co-op serves to collect and sell the produce or products to co-op members.
Exemplary cooperative success has so far been attained by the thriving royal-initiated Nong Po Dairy Cooperatives Ratchaburi Limited, under royal patronage. In 1962, a royal-initiated dairy farm was established within Chitlada Villa grounds. Results of study, research and experiments obtained there were disseminated to dairy farmers in Ratchaburi.
Genuine understanding starts with hands-on experience. Royal studies went hand in hand with development, so every phase was two-faceted. All procedural details were recorded by His Majesty as regards the methods, costs, etc. Then, development started based on the operation there. About that time, His Majesty paid a state visit to Denmark, during which King Frederick IX rendered his support for the Thai-Denmark dairy farm. That gave birth to the dairy business, which prospered in Thailand henceforward.
In 1969, the royal-initiated Suan Dusit Dairy Factory was inaugurated in the grounds of Chitlada Villa. His Majesty stated his intention as follows. This is the first dairy factory in Thailand, and it is something to be proud of, since it has been designed and built solely by Thai people. Those who need any information or want to run such a business for their own prosperity and thereby for the country's economic stability can come observe the activities in the factory at any time. On the same day of His Majesty's above-mentioned address, Mr. Chai Janpiwat lodged a petition with him on behalf of a group of dairy farmers, asking for royal assistance in the face of a problem relating to surplus milk in the market. His Majesty's short-term solution to the problem was to purchase surplus milk from the farmers and sell it to Suan Dusit Dairy Factory for processing. After a certain period of test operation at Suan Dusit Dairy Factory, a dairy business to be operated by farmers was launched in the following year. A certain amount from the Royal Personal Funds and donation by Mr. Tawit Glyn Pratum, a dairy farm and factory was constructed in Nong Po Sub-District, Ratchaburi Province, under the name Nong Po Ratchaburi Dairy Products Company Limited.
At the initial stage of the dairy business, Individual farmers went their own separate ways as far as cattle raising, acquisition and selling were concerned. After a while, they were faced with marketing problems. Analysing the situation, His Majesty found that to attain the state of self-sufficiency, the dairy farmers would need to come together and conduct group operation. That was the start of Nong Po Dairy Cooperatives.
On His Majesty's initiative, Nong Po Ratchaburi Dairy Products Company Limited was registered as Nong Po Ratchaburi Dairy Cooperatives Limited under royal patronage. The reason was given in His Majesty's address as follows. The only way to enhance milk sales is to set up a dairy factory to be owned by the manufacturers. But in doing so, difficulties lie in the requirement of a high degree of discipline and self-sacrifice for the common good.
I think we should look at the business in the context of a country, because every member shares ownership. All profits will be shared among members. Our occupation was made possible by His Majesty. We have to carry it out with determination and absolute transparency. If we adhere to honesty, the result will be productive.
Business of Nong Po Ratchaburi Dairy Cooperatives Limited, under royal patronage, is thriving, so that it has been able to embark on a fully integrated operation, ranging from rearing of milk cow, milk processing, all the way through to animal feed. Complete cooperative services include filling stations, sales centre and banking.
His Majesty was surprised that we were operating a supermarket and expressed his wish to come and observe our business operations. That was when he had heart problem. I got a call from the Royal Medical Team asking us not to press the King for the visit which he had earlier fixed for around January. As it happened, he finally was well again and could come in May. He was very pleased by what he saw.
Setting out as a small-sized dairy factory with more than 100 staff, now the cooperatives has become a large enterprise, having over 4,000 members and a model of success, enhanced by the royal-initiated group operation, which is the key to the complete benefits enjoyed by the farmers.
The more business transactions, the bigger profit share. Some got 20,000 and some 100,000 from animal feed and milk they sell to the co-op. And when they buy commodities or use our filling station service, they can do on credit.
His Majesty has actually initiated the promotion of cooperative system among various other groups of farmers besides dairy farmers, although admittedly some of them did not meet with much success. Many began to wonder how cooperative system would fare in the context of national business competition. The extent of success achieved by Nong Po Ratchaburi Dairy Cooperatives Limited under royal patronage. It is a model of success and proof that a transparency, orientated and disciplined business enterprise which strictly upholds the principles of a cooperative system will generate full benefits for farmers on a sustained basis.
His Majesty once told me that he went to sleep around 4 in the morning and got up around 10 o'clock, unless there were royal engagements. His work was for the good of his subjects and the country. So why would we not do something out of gratitude to him? We, as the children, know our parents carry on their works for our well-being and progress, or at least to ensure that we do not cause suffering or distress to others. But given His Majesty the King's royal birth, his benevolence overshadows our parents, since he helps us, our parents, our children and grandchildren. Our King is beyond comparison the whole world over.
The route of royal-initiated development has indeed covered a great expanse, veering off in a multitude of directions and dimensions, and yet forming a network of branches which systematically and remarkably interconnect. Given the complexity of the problems, one would be amazed as to His Majesty's sagacity and deep perception evident in the royal-initiated projects. Thorough understanding as to where the core of the problems lies and profound knowledge resulting in correlated effects of the solution prove instrumental to and essential for His Majesty's genuine acquaintance with his subjects. His Majesty approaches the solution by simplifying complex situations, making confusing issues comprehensible, and using common sense. Success is gradual but ensured, as all is based on matters of fact. Strengthened by the protective policy of cooperative system, His Majesty's initiation provides security against external risks and brings about the farmer's greater bargaining power, both in the production and marketing, thereby paving the way towards sustained agro-industrial growth. Practically, though, many rough spots remain to be ironed out. This requires thorough understanding of the cooperative system, as well as the notion of unity as a virtue among the members. Still, it is the only key to sustained solution to the farmers' plight and their risk-free future existence.
It would not be too far-fetched to say that this is just a fraction of agricultural development based on His Majesty's sufficiency economy theory, the three-faceted aspect of a solution to any problem, comprising understanding, acquaintance and development, has been clearly illustrated in His Majesty's working style and step-by-step rational approach. His Majesty's solutions all revolve around the success of self-reliance on the part of his subjects.